Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of another Starlink Group 10-1 mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Space Launch Complex 40, Florida, the Space Coast. We hope you all are doing fine and enjoyed the exciting Starship's 4th integrated flight test. So now we are awaiting for a Falcon 9 liftoff at 8 p.m. Eastern Time from Slick 40, Eastern Florida, for a northeasterly launch for SpaceX Starlink mission. Today's mission is a little different because it will be the first Starlink mission from the Cape to launch on a northeast trajectory in 1.5 years. The Starlink mission 10-1 will launch 22 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. And today's Starlink mission, as I said, is special as it is the first Starlink mission from Cape to launch on a northeast trajectory in 1.5 years. Today's Starlink mission marks SpaceX's amazing 354th overall launch. Hello, my name is Dipta Maitra, performing the commentary for today's mission launch, and we are super excited bringing you the coverage of SpaceX 61st overall launch and the 59th launch of Falcon 9 of this year. This will be the 42nd dedicated Starlink mission of the year for SpaceX. Prior to today's launch, SpaceX has launched 923 Starlink satellites so far over 41 flights and overall 6,571 Starlink satellites to date. Now, before getting into the mission details, just a reminder, tomorrow, that is on 8th June, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams will be taking us on a tour of the Boeing Starliner spacecraft at the International Space Station. So don't forget to tune in as we will be streaming, and the stream will start at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be 1 p.m. UTC. Now, just a heads up, it's just me running the show for the launches, so if we hit any technical snags, hang tight, but don't worry, I will do my best to walk you through the Falcon 9 rocket launch happening in 40 minutes from now and counting. So now let's get back to today's mission. So far, SpaceX reports that the weather is looking less than average for today's Falcon 9 launch opportunity, although the range is ready to support, having 40% probability of violation today and 60% favorable outlook, with the major primary concerns being anvil crowd rules, cumulus crowd rule, and surface electric fields rule. I don't know whether they will be able to launch with such probability of violation and associated risk, but if they proceed with the launch, we hope that they are able to launch on time and not have to push too far. But if they don't launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow, that is Saturday, June 8th, with launch window opening at 7:47 p.m. Eastern Time. As for today, SpaceX is currently targeting a liftoff time of Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 5 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and 12 a.m. UTC on Saturday, that is June 8th. Firstly, we would like to thank all of you joining us for today's launch and would request that if you haven't already, please like this video to help YouTube's algorithm bring in more space fans and rocket enthusiasts. Also, it will be so kind of you subscribing to our channel as we bring space launch coverages with comprehensive stats and in-depth details. Now let's take a look at today's payload details for Starlink Group 10-1 mission. This launch marks the 42nd dedicated Starlink launch for this year. Starlink satellites are built at SpaceX Satellite Development Facility in Redmond, Washington, and today's launch consists of 22 version 2 mini satellites. The version 2 variant of Starlink is too large to fit inside a Falcon 9 fairing and is meant to be launched by Starship. So for that, SpaceX modified the original version 2 blueprint into a smaller, more compact one named version 2 mini. SpaceX indicated they would build satellites of the second generation, that is the Gen 2 constellation, in two different but technically identical form factors. One with the physical structures tailored to launch on Falcon 9, that is version 2 mini, and another tailored for the launch on Starships, that is the original version 2. Each Starlink satellite is equipped with powerful 5 advanced Ku band phased array antennas and 3 dual band parabolic antennas, utilizing Ka and E band to provide increased capacity. Together, these antennas utilizes Ku, Ka and E band frequencies, allowing Starlink to provide high bandwidth connectivity, that is 4 times more capacity per satellite than earlier versions. Each satellite features a dual solar array with a size of 52.5 square meters, that is 565 square feet, which unfolds to a wingspan of 100 feet. Also, it has a high capacity battery to provide power to the payloads. The two solar arrays are also aeroneutral, which enables faster on-orbit maneuvers when required. Each Starlink satellite contains 3 space laser transponders, that is optical inter-satellite links or ISLs, for intercommunications, operating at up to 200 gigabytes per second, which together across the constellation form a global internet mesh that can connect customers anywhere in the world. It also enables the spacecraft to transmit data without local ground stations, providing truly global coverage. Each Starlink version 2 mini satellite weighs nearly 800 kilograms, that is 1063 pounds. Each Starlink satellites are equipped with efficient ion Hall effect thrusters powered by argon, which enables Starlink satellites to orbit raise, maneuver in space, and deorbit at the end of their useful life. Starlink is the first Krypton-propelled spacecraft ever flown. Later, switched to argon Hall effect thrusters for cost effectiveness. Also, upon switching to argon, Starlink is the first argon-propelled spacecraft ever flown in space. Now, related to Krypton, the argon required to fuel Starlink version 2 satellites will be practically free. To put it into perspective, fueling its next constellation of almost 30,000 version 2 satellites could cost SpaceX less than fueling 4,000 version 1 satellites, which were based on Krypton. Also, SpaceX claims that its second generation thrusters using argon has 2.4 times the thrust and 1.5 times the specific impulse of the previously krypton fueled thrusters. Today's payload will be placed in an orbit with an altitude of 560 kilometers and an inclination of 53 degrees. But here is a thing I want to mention. As of now, we found that this altitude and inclination details to be the most relevant and accurate. But in real, it may differ, as today's launch is the first launch of Starlink Group 10. Post today's launch, we will be getting the most accurate and trustworthy details for the orbital placement and will be reflected in our future streams. Also, this orbital placement configuration does not apply to every Starlink satellite. Starlink satellites are placed in different configuration based on their group. We will dive into the details more thoroughly in a while. Starlink uses custom-built navigation sensors named Star Tracker that surveys the stars to determine each satellite's location, altitude, and orientation for best possible broadband throughput. Each Starlink satellite contains 4 reaction wheels, providing agile attitude control for the vehicle. The hot sphere configuration ensures high reliability operation, and its aluminum flywheel is fully demisable at the end of life. Also worth mentioning, the Starlink satellites are equipped with an autonomous collision avoidance system for avoiding collision with other spacecraft and space junk autonomously, which utilizes the US Department of Defense debris tracking database. Well, there is an update that SpaceX has pushed its liftoff time a little bit further. Now liftoff is targeted for 8:28 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 5:28 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and 12:28 a.m. UTC, that is Saturday on June 8th. Now let's go through a quick comparison of latency between Starlink and geostationary satellites. Earlier we had an update that Starlink achieved a new internal median latency record of 28 milliseconds. Also now they have raised a goal of median latency for Starlink internet in the US to get below 20 milliseconds. Also would like to welcome Fairmate for joining us. Good morning Fairmate, hope you are doing well. Thanks for tuning in, and we are sorry that that day after the Starship launch we couldn't make it to have the coverage for the docking of Starliner. Actually, after the Starship launch, we got busy making different contents for the Starship itself, and also I thought that you won't be there as because it was already late for you. So that was also a reason, of course. So for that, we are sorry. But for now, enjoy the stream. And again, thanks for joining us. So getting back to the discussion of the latency which we were doing previously. So you know that the internet that comes from satellite, most of the time it is from a single satellite that's orbiting about 35,786 kilometers from Earth. Because it is so far away, the time it takes for the data to go back and forth, what we call latency, is pretty high. This makes it tough to do things like streaming movies, playing online games, or making video calls. Now let's talk about Starlink. Excuse me for the interruption. What I was discussing that, let me start it from the beginning, that you know the internet that comes from satellite, most of the time it is from a single satellite that's orbiting about 35,786 kilometers from Earth. Because it is so far away, the time it takes for data to go back and forth, what we call latency, is pretty high. This makes it tough to do things like streaming movies, playing online games, or making video calls. Now let's talk about Starlink. It's like a big team of thousands of satellites that are much closer to us, just above 550 kilometers away from Earth. They are all over the place, covering the whole globe. And because they are closer, the latency is way lower. To put it into perspective, just think of 25 milliseconds of latency compared to 600 and plus milliseconds of latency. You can see on your screen what is the number of round trips in case of Starlink compared to a geostationary satellite. That's a huge difference. So, in a nutshell, Starlink's lower orbit makes it a game changer for satellite internet. This could mean smoother video calls, lag-free online gaming, and other high data rate activities. Now moving on, let's learn a little bit about Starlink's collision avoidance system. It is quite fascinating to know how, despite having so many satellites around the Earth, they manage to stay safe and avoid collisions. SpaceX designs the Starlink satellites orbit raising and orbit lowering reference trajectories with a time optimal path planning algorithm. This algorithm includes additional constraints to ensure that the Starlink satellites always remain at large and safe distance from space stations, other spacecrafts, space debris, and also from other Starlink satellites under nominal circumstances. As an additional safety measure, Starlink's screening system constantly monitors the satellite's planned reference trajectories against the space stations, space junks, and other Starlink satellites. The system alerts the Starlink operators immediately when a potential conjunction is detected and reference trajectories are replanned to change the geometry of the encounter and avoid the conjunction whenever possible. Each Starlink launch typically includes enough satellites to fill several orbital planes. For this reason, a train of satellites is usually divided into smaller trains that depart from parking orbit on different dates to target specific orbital planes, which is also a part of pre-planned conjunction avoidance. These techniques for avoiding conjunctions at the planning stages are an equivalent precaution in addition to Starlink's collision avoidance system. In this context, conjunction avoidance during planning refers to designing trajectories that maintain satellites far away from space stations, space junks, other spacecraft, and from other Starlink satellites under nominal circumstances. Deconflicting trajectories at the planning stage requires predicting potential conjunctions several weeks into the future, which naturally limits the accuracy of the results. As part of SpaceX's multi-tiered approach to space safety, Starlink's automatic collision avoidance system allows satellites to plan maneuvers to minimize the collision probability during close approaches that could not be avoided when planning. Now let's look into this table we have here for the orbital status of the second generation Starlink satellites prior to today's launch. As mentioned before, you will notice the differences in orbital placement parameters for each group of Starlink satellites. In this case, we have details for group 5, 6, 7 and 8. As of now, we don't have particular details and confirming details from SpaceX for the group 10, but it is relative to group 7 and 8 orbital parameters for today's launch. So first we are having the nominal altitude. This is the average altitude at which the satellite in a particular group are intended to orbit the Earth. For instance, group 5 and 6 satellites are planned to orbit at an altitude of 530 kilometers, while for group 7 it is 525 kilometers and for group 8 it is 535 kilometers. Also, a point to be noted is that the satellites can be deployed between a range of -50 kilometers to +70 kilometers relative to the nominal altitude, but not exceeding the maximum of 580 kilometers. Next, we are having the inclination. This is the angle between the orbital plane of satellites and the equatorial plane of the Earth. Different inclinations allows the satellite to cover different areas of the Earth. Now, for the satellites in group 5 and 6, we have an inclination of 43 degrees, whereas group 7 and 8 have an inclination of 53 degrees. Next, we have the planned satellites. Each group has a plan to launch 2,500 satellites for different orbital and suborbital completions. Moving on to satellites launched for each group. Prior to today's launch, the status is: for group 5, 699 satellites have been launched, whereas for group 6, 1,387 satellites have been launched. For group 7, 389 satellites have been launched, and for group 8, 81 satellites have been launched so far. Now we have active satellites. This is the number of launch satellites that are currently active, excluding decaying, deorbited, and failed ones. For group 5, 688 out of 699 launch satellites are active. For group 6, 1,349 out of the 1,387 launch satellites are active. For group 7, 385 out of 389 launch satellites are active, and for group 8, all the launch satellites are active so far, that is 81 out of 81. Next, we have the required satellites for completion. This is the number of additional satellites that are needed to be launched to complete the orbital shell and subshells for each group. So for group 5 and group 6, an additional of 414 satellites are required. For group 7, 2,111 satellites are required. And for group 8, more 2,419 satellites are required. The committed completion date for half of the target is December 2028, and the full project is for December 2031. Now we have a request again for you folks. If you haven't already, please consider giving this video a like. It really helps YouTube's algorithm to bring in more space fans and rocket enthusiasts so that they can discover this stream out. And if you are feeling we are adding value to your viewing experience, consider subscribing. We would be super grateful for your support. Now let's take a look at the flight record for the booster supporting today's Starlink 10-1 mission. The booster with tail number 1069 will be supporting today's mission, which is a mature booster with 15 previous flights in its record, including missions like commercial resupply mission, that is CRS-24, Eutelsat Hotbird 13F, OneWeb 1, SES-18 and SES-19, and 11 Starlink mission. Right now it is awaiting for its 16th flight, just some minutes away. Previously, with Starlink Group 6-59 launch on May 17th from Cape Canaveral, SpaceX achieved a record. For the first time, a Falcon booster with tail number 1062 launched for record-breaking 21st time. Currently, other boosters with tail number 1060, 1061 and 1067 have 20 launches so far as their milestones, waiting to reach their record-breaking milestones soon. Now let's have a look at the bar graphs. Before today's launch, SpaceX completed 58 launches of Falcon 9 so far this year as part of its milestone, with recent Starlink Group 8-5 mission launch from here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station back on June 4th. And it was a mission which launched 13 direct-to-cell satellites. SpaceX hit a big milestone this year's 50th launch with the previous Starlink 8-7 mission. That's just two more than half of the last year's Falcon 9 launches, which totaled 48. Now with the last Starlink mission launch, that is the Group 8-5 mission, they have 10 more launches than half of the total launches made last year. This year's count already surpasses the total number of Falcon 9 launches from all the years leading up to 2021, and they are now getting close to launches made in 2022 with only 3 launches to go. Now with today's launch of Starlink Group 10-1 mission, the bar graph depicts 59 Falcon 9 launches so far this year. They have already done more than half as many launches as they did all of the last year, and it's only been 5 months and a week. If they keep up with this pace, they are on their mighty way to hit 140 to 148 launches by the end of this year. SpaceX is really pushing hard to achieve their big goals. Also, we just witnessed the mesmerizing fourth integrated flight test of Starship on June 6th, now awaiting the fifth one, probably towards the end of June or early July. Now please allow us a couple of seconds to check whether the launch is on time or not and to stay updated. But be tuned in here only. We will be just right back in few seconds. So guys, there is another update. SpaceX did push its liftoff time a little farther again. This time they are targeting 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:02 p.m. Friday Pacific Time, both on June 7th, and it will be 1:02 a.m. UTC, that is on June 8th. And even with these delays happening, it is unclear that whether they will be launching today or not, as because the probability of violation is 40% with 60% favorable outlook. So before moving on, we really appreciate everyone you being here. Big thanks to our amazing YouTube community for being here today. Now, if you haven't already, please like this video to help YouTube's algorithm bring some more space enthusiasts and rocket chasers to discover this stream and join us. And if you consider subscribing to us, we would be really grateful for your support. We are truly thankful for every one of you on this live stream, and your support really means the world to us. Let's go ahead as we progress through the countdown and review the milestones that lie ahead of us on this Cape Canaveral flight. At T-minus 38 minutes, countdown begins at this point when SpaceX launch director gives the go for the start of propellant load. If everything looks fine, prop load begins at T-minus 30 minutes mark with the loading of rocket grade kerosene or RP1 on both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, LOX load, that is super chill liquid oxygen, is loaded on board the first stage. And then at T-minus 16 minutes, which will be the next event that we are looking for here, that's when the second stage liquid oxygen load begins. Now before moving on, we would like to welcome Marcos Antonio. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you will be enjoying the stream, and we are really glad that you are with us. And referring to Fairmade, would like to ask a question that time when I said you that welcome to our stream and all those things, did you got to hear me or not? Can you just say me that, because I all of a sudden noticed that my microphone is not working. So if I did, you couldn't heard me that time, so for that I'm sorry. But as you know, you are always welcome, and welcome again for today. Thanks for joining in. Hope you are doing well. Now let's move on and let's see the pre-launch timeline that we are having ahead of us. Now at T-minus 7 minutes, that's when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engine gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbopumps, which helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damages during the startup sequence. At about 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. In a T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. The process begins with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairing opening up, followed by the transport ejector or the strong back reclining about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. It remains in that position until liftoff, It's when it rapidly pulls back to clear the way for the Falcon 9 rocket's vertical ascent. The strong back, positioned alongside the vehicle, also referred as the transport erector or acronymed as TE, which fulfills multiple functions. It supplies propellants, provides air conditioning, pressurization gases, and electrical power. Additionally, it transports the Falcon 9 to the launch pad and positions it for the launch. Also, a thing to be mentioned here that the reclining process here at Cape and Kennedy Space Center is different from Vandenberg Space Center, Space Force Base. Here at Cape and Kennedy Space Center, we recline the strong back about 1.5 degrees. But in Vandenberg Space Force Base launches, we recline it about 13 degrees from the Falcon 9. So moving on, at T minus 3 minutes mark, the first stage liquid oxygen loading should be complete, followed by the second stage liquid oxygen loading, wrapping up at T minus 2 minute mark. At this point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. At T minus 1 minute mark, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. In the final 60 seconds of countdown, the control of the flight system, that is the launch sequence, is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. If everything looks good, at T minus 45 seconds mark, the launch director will give the final go for Falcon 9 liftoff. Now at T minus 3 seconds, the engine ignition sequence start command being issued by onboard engine controller. Finally, at T0, we have liftoff. If all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy, flight computers will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a liftoff time of Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral at 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:02 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and which will be 1:02 a.m. Saturday UTC, that is on June 8th. Now let's go ahead and briefly step through the trajectory for today's mission. Today's trajectory is a little bit different from other Starlink missions. Falcon 9 will lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 for Cape Canaveral Space Force Station with spacecraft on board the batch of 22 Starlink satellites for a northeast trajectory heading into low Earth orbit, that is indicated by that green line on your screen. The red line indicates where Falcon 9 first stage will land after stage separation, just a little later, leaving Florida's Space Coast. This is going to be a drone ship landing using autonomous spaceport drone ship. For today, it is A Shortfall of Gravitas drone ship, one of the two here on the East Coast, which means that the first stage booster with tail number 1069 flying for its 16th time will be returning heading out to the drone ship for its landing. The planned booster recovery is about 618 kilometers with estimated fairing recovery at nearly 700 kilometers downrange, and the stage 2 debris re-entry will be south of Australia. Currently, there are 3 in SpaceX drone ship fleet. One of the 3 drone ships just read the instructions and of the 3 drone ships just read the instructions and A Shortfall of Gravitas are stationed here in Florida, while of course I Still Love You is stationed in California. We expect the addition of a 4th drone ship likely by the end of this year or early next year. Now, just for a quick knowledge, what happens when the booster needs to execute a land landing but lacks sufficient propellant margin? In case of RTLS, that is return to launch site operation, as we saw recently in the European Space Agency's Earth Care mission in Vandenberg Space Force Space launch, the rocket lands at a predetermined landing site, which are SpaceX landing zones, using only its propulsion system. But when propellant margins do not permit a RTLS landing, the rockets return to a floating landing platform in the ocean, that is a drone ship. So that's a preventive measure taken every time for an RTLS operation. Now let's discuss about the fairing recovery. The 2 halves of the payload fairing will be recovered slightly farther downrange. As I mentioned before, that it will be approximately 700 kilometers downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship, after they will be smoothly splashed down with the guidance of parachutes. SpaceX will utilize a recovery vessel to retrieve them from the Atlantic waters. SpaceX manufactures the fairing in-house with the total cost for 2 halves is nearly $6 million. So it is of no wonder that SpaceX aims to recover the fairings for repetitive use, mirroring their approach with rocket boosters, upholding the motto of reusability and sustainability. SpaceX has dedicated years of effort to the recovery and the reuse of payload fairing with their research as well. You can see on your screen how a fairing recovery looks like. The recovery, the recovery vessel on the screen you are seeing it's dug, but for today's supporting recovery vessel is Bob. Other recovery vessel that is Doug currently awaiting its next assignment. SpaceX has named its two new recovery ships Bob and Doug after Bob Bacon and Doug Hurley, the two NASA astronauts and the first crew SpaceX launched for NASA under commercial crew program on the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station back in 2020. Also, May 30th marked the 4th anniversary of Falcon 9 launching NASA's Demo 2 mission to the space station, returning human spaceflight to the United States. Since then, Dragon has carried 50 people into orbit. Now here is a video of a fairing half. You know that's protective shell from a rocket's payload. Now it's making its way back home, plunging through the Earth's atmosphere, and the coolest part, it got this mesmerizing halo around it. It's like some sort of a celestial angel making a grand entrance. Now please allow us a couple of seconds again to check whether the launch is on time or not, and to stay updated. Please be tuned in. We will be right back in just few seconds. So far, SpaceX has not changed anymore their liftoff time. It's targeting for 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:02 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and 1:02 a.m. UTC, that is Saturday on June 8th. Now let's have a quick look through the launch timeline for Falcon 9's rocket passing these events following liftoff. At T plus 1 minute and 10 seconds, Falcon 9 will pass through max Q, a point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Then there will be a couple of different events in rapid succession. First will be the first stage main engine cutoff, that is MECO, at T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. followed by a major milestone within 3 seconds at t plus 2 minutes and 28 seconds, where first and second stage will separate from each other. Just after 8 seconds later, second stage MBAC engine will ignite for the first time during today's flight, that is SES-1 at t plus 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Coming up next at t plus 2 minutes and 53 seconds mark, Falcon 9's payload fairing will be jettisoned. At t plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds, the first stage entry burn will begin, lasting for 27 seconds up to 6 minutes and 38 seconds mark, ending the entry burn for the first stage. At this time around, we will hear the callouts for stage 1 FTS, that is the flight termination systems, being saved. For a quick knowledge, the stage 1 FTS is saved, or one can say flight termination systems are turned off or disabled after the re-entry burn. Whereas for the second stage, FTS is saved after the orbital insertion burn. We will also hear the callouts for stage 1 being transonic and stage 2 being in terminal guidance. Next major milestone at t plus 8 minutes and 4 seconds, the first stage landing burn will commence, which will orient and set up the first stage for SpaceX iconic precision landing. At t plus 8 minutes and 26 seconds, the first stage will land on droneship A Shortfall of Gravitas for 74th time, marking SpaceX 317th overall landing. The second stage MBAC engine will shut down, that is SECO-1, and enter into a parking orbit at t plus 8 minutes and 30 seconds. T plus 43 minutes and 38 seconds, the second stage MBAC engine will reignite for a quick 1 second burn, that is SES-2, and turning it off at t plus 43 minutes and 39 seconds, that is SECO-2, which will set up Starlink deployment at approximately t plus 52 minutes and 32 seconds. On your screen you can see all this timeline which I mentioned in a pictorial form, from launch to the landing on a drone ship. Following the launch, as the vehicle ascends, it will have a stage separation. Meanwhile, the second stage, while it will be heading towards the orbit, the first stage will have a flip maneuver and it will be deploying its grid fins. After that, it will have an entry burn. Passing through aerodynamic guidance, it will make its vertical landing on a drone ship. For today, the drone ship is A Shortfall of Gravitas. And meanwhile, the second stage will have the fairing separation. After that, it will be deploying the payload. For today, it is 22 Starlink version 2 mini satellites. Now here is a short time-lapse video of onboard view of a Falcon 9 first stage from liftoff to a land landing. As we have liftoff surpassing the max Q point, that's when the pressure is at its maximum, we will witness the stage separation. Following that, the vehicle will rise towards the apogee before deploying the hypersonic grid fins to position and orient the first stage for landing. You may notice intermittent bursts of nitrogen gas for altitude control. Coming up, then there will be an entry burn as we re-enter the Earth's atmosphere to slow down and protect the first stage from the heat of re-entry. And for the grand finale, the landing burn kicks in with landing legs being deployed for a smooth and successful landing. Now, if you are vibing with us, please give the video a like. It helps YouTube's algorithm catch the drift and bring more space lovers and rocket buffs our way. And if you haven't subscribed us, now is the time. We would be totally amazed to have you on board. Your support means the world to us. Before proceeding, please again give us a few minutes to check if the launch is proceeding as scheduled and to keep ourselves informed. I'm checking the liftoff time again and again, as because today's we have 40% of launch violation and 60% favorable outlook. So let's have a look about the launch timeline, and I'm coming back in just a second, so be here. As of now, the liftoff is still on time as before, although SpaceX did push the liftoff time from the initial liftoff time which they mentioned earlier. So currently they are targeting for 9:02 p.m. Eastern time, which will be 6:02 p.m. Pacific time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and 1:02 a.m. UTC, that is Saturday on June 8th. So now let's come to some stats related to today's launch. Today's launch marks 354th SpaceX overall launch and 42nd dedicated launch of Starlink satellites for this year. This is the 343rd Falcon 9 launch to date. This will be the 16th flight of this particular Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission with tail number 1069. Also, It is the 59th Falcon 9 launch of 2024 so far and is SpaceX 61st overall launch of this year, including the third and fourth integrated flight test of Starship. We are expecting the next fifth integrated flight test probably on the end of June or early July. This is SpaceX 288th Falcon booster reflight to date. That is the launch of a booster that has flown at least once before. 191st orbital launch for SpaceX, launching from Slick 40. This is the 246th overall launch from this pad, that is Space Launch Complex 40. And with today's mission success, SpaceX will have a remarkable 6,593 Starlink satellites launched to date. Now moving on to some reusability statistics. This launch marks 274th Falcon 9 booster reflight to date. This is the 74th landing on a drone ship, that is A Shortfall of Gravitas. This will be the 16th landing of the first stage booster with tail number 1069. And with this mission's first stage landing, which paves the way to 248th overall drone ship landing and marking 300 Falcon 9 landing to date and 317th SpaceX overall landing to date. Also, the Falcon 9's 300 landing to date also makes this today's mission a bit different and special. Speaking of drone ship, it is worth mentioning among the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas has a flawless record with 0 unsuccessful landing attempts and 73 successful landings. In comparison, Just Read the Instructions has encountered 3 unsuccessful landings with 83 successful landings. While Of Course I Still Love You has experienced 7 unsuccessful landings and 91 successful landings. This gives A Shortfall of Gravitas the lead in clean and successful drone ship landing attempts. Also, please note that these drone ship landing stats which I mentioned here right now are excluding today's mission. All these stats are prior to today's mission. Now let's have a look into some key stats for SpaceX launches in this year, including today's mission. So SpaceX has a total of 61 launches, and out of those 17 were non-Starlink missions and 2 Starship launches. SpaceX reused booster for 57 times in those launches, showing their commitment to sustainability and reusability. Now, if we look into the geographical distribution, we get they have 41 launches from East Coast with 12 from Launch Complex 39A, that is Kennedy Space Center, and 29 from Space Launch Complex 40, including today's one, that is from here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. On the west coast, we have 18 launches, all from Space Launch Complex 4 East, that is Vandenberg Space Force Base. And there was 2 launches from Gulf Coast of Starbase back in Texas for the Starship 3rd and 4th integrated flight test, now awaiting the next 5th integrated flight test. As for landings, they have nailed it 58 times. Most of them were on drone ships, with 45 successful landings, 14 on Of Course I Still Love You, 12 on Just Read the Instructions, and 19 on A Shortfall of Gravitas, including one from today. And for ground landings, they have pulled off 13 times, out of which 8 times were on the landing zone 1, only 1 time on landing zone 2, and 4 times on landing zone 4 respectively. Guys, again SpaceX did pushed the liftoff time. Now they are targeting for 9:32 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:32 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and which will be 1:32 a.m. UTC, Saturday, that is June 8th. It was quite inevitable that they will be doing so, because as I said before, we have 40% of violation for today's launch and 60% favorable outlook. So SpaceX is looking for a favorable time for their launch. Now moving on to this year's orbital launches, including today's one, we have this pie chart. United States is dominating with 17 launches, comprising a substantial 61.9% of the global total. Recently, we had Rocket Lab's 49th Electron launching NASA's pre-fire CubeSats on pre-fire and ice mission, and we did had Starliner crew flight test from Slick 41 here at Cape. Now China follows closely behind, accounting for 24.8% with 28 launches so far. Meanwhile, Russia maintains a steady pace with 8 launches, with a recent Soyuz 2.1A launch of ISS Progress 88 or Progress MS-27 cargo resupply mission back on May 30th from Baikonur Cosmodrome, making 7.1% of the pie. While Japan has 3 launches so far, making 2.7% of the pie, both India and Iran have entered the fray with 2 launches each, making 1.8% of the pie. While this is a close competition, but United States and China are undeniably dominating the space race this year. So now we have this pie chart showing 2024 orbital launches by rocket variations, including today's launch. Let's have a look and let me break it down for you. The big green slice of the pie, that's the Falcon 9 rocket, a real heavy hitter this year, having the biggest share of the pie with 59 launches, making up more than half of the whole pie at 51.8% and leading. Then we got this pink slice labeled others, which is a mix of different rockets, including like Atlas 5, Delta 4 Heavy, Starship, Vulcan Centaur, ISRO's GSLV Mark II, PSLV DL, Japan's H3, H2A, Iran's Simorgh and Kayam 100, Russia's Angara A5, China's Gravity 1 and others. These names are not exhaustive and I'm not taking all the names here because the list is a bit long. So they got 33 launches in total, which is 28.9% of the pie, which is quite impressive. Next up, we got Rocket Lab's Electron with 7 launches making 6.1% of the pie. Also, we have Soyuz 2 rockets with 7 launches so far this year with 6.1% of the pie. Last but not the least, we got China's CZ-2D and CZ-2C rockets, that is the Long March 2D and Long March 2C rockets. So the CZ-2D, that is a Long March 2D, has 5 launches making 4.4% of the pie, and the CZ-2C, that is Long March 2C, has 3 launches with 2.6% of the pie. Although they might be smaller slices of the pie, but every launch counts. Also, let's have a look at the chat. Of course, fair made, we are here only and we will be striving till the last until we are not having the liftoff. So you don't have to worry about it. Have your lunch. And also thanks that you are still here with us. As of now, the liftoff is targeted for 9:32 p.m. Eastern Time. SpaceX initially targeted 8 p.m. Eastern Time, but in between they have pushed the liftoff time 2 times. And for today, the backup opportunities are available until 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So we still have nearly 40 minutes, 38 minutes of liftoff time launch window. Hopefully they can make it through within the launch window of today. And the liftoff time, as I mentioned, that it is 9:32 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:32 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and it will be 1:32 a.m. UTC Saturday, that is June 8th. As of now, there is no other information coming from SpaceX about anything that they are delaying, for which reason or not, but it is quite a bit evident that from the weather report which we got from the 45th Weather Squadron, that today's primary concerns are quite a little complex regarding to others, and we are having 40% probability 40% of violation of launch, and also we are expecting some isolated storms there as well. Today's primary concerns are anvil cloud rules, cumulus cloud rules, and surface electric field rules. Also on your screen you can see the wind will be also a little bit on the higher side with 22 miles per hour. That is the lift of wind I'm referring. But other than that, the booster recovery and for the upper wind shear, they are all having low risk for today's launch. So meanwhile we are having nearly, let me check it, we do have a time of 46 minutes till the liftoff. So as we are getting an additional time which we don't get on other days, let's discuss about our very own Falcon 9 a little bit in details. Falcon 9 that's supporting today's mission is the world's first orbital class 2 stage rocket, which is 70 meter, that is 229.6 feet tall, and 3.7 meter, that is 12 feet wide. It is designed for reliable and safe transportation of satellites, cargo, and people into Earth orbit and beyond. Now let's dive in a little bit more. At the very top of the rocket is the payload fairing, made of a carbon composite material with a height of 13.1 meter or 43 feet and 5.2 meter or 17.1 feet in diameter. The fairing is a protective shell that houses all of the spacecraft and shields them from the aerodynamic heating and mechanical stresses that happens as we ride through the Earth's atmosphere. The aerodynamic shape of the fairing also contributes to Falcon 9's overall efficiency, reducing drag as we accelerate through the lower parts of the Earth's atmosphere. But once we get to the vacuum of space, those two fairing halves separate, exposing the payloads within, and then those two fairing halves will fall back to Earth with a parachute guidance where SpaceX will recover them to be refurbished and reused on future flights. In case of a crewed or cargo mission, the payload fairing is replaced with Dragon spacecraft. Now speaking of Dragon, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 people and cargo in the spacecraft unpressurized pressurized section or both together. In addition, Dragon can carry cargo in the spacecraft's unpressurized trunk, which can also accommodate secondary payloads. Now here is a short video of a fairing separation test conducted by SpaceX at NASA's Glen Plum Brook station, which offers the world's largest vacuum chamber. This video you are seeing as the payload separation occurs. This video is being slowed down. This event occurs at nearly the 4 times faster than a speeding bullet, and you can say that it is 10 times the speed of the sound. For that very reason, this video is being slowed down so that we can see it in a good way. Now moving on, we have the second stage, which is right below the fairing, that has a single Merlin vacuum engine or MVAC engine, which can produce 981 kilonewton of thrust, and that will ignite shortly after stage separation to take the payload to their target orbits. Also, it can be restarted multiple times to place multiple payloads into different orbit, as in case of rideshare missions. It will be fired twice on today's flight. It will ignite a third time after the deployment of Starlink satellites for a deorbit burn to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up to help eliminate the risk of any unnecessary space debris. It has the modified Merlin engine, only equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burn in the vacuum of space, which can produce slightly more than 0.22 million pounds of thrust, and the MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix as the first stage, that is the rocket grade kerosene, that is the RP1, and liquid oxygen. Now below the second stage we got the interstage. Now interstage is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core which is surrounded by carbon fiber. Now where in interstage, where is the Merlin vacuum engine nozzles are located, and the interstage is what connects the two stages, that is the stage 1 and stage 2 together. It also houses the center pusher mechanism that separates the first and second stage around 2.5 minutes into flight. It consists of deployable hypersonic grid fins, which are titanium winglets that provides orientation and stability for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere. Located at the upper part of the inner interstage are three mechanical latches that connects to the Falcon 9's second stage. After the main engine cutoff of the first stage, high pressure helium is used to release these latches, ensuring a smooth separation through pneumatic pushers. Now below the interstage we got our first stage, that's also referred to as the booster. The booster marks the booster makes up the bottom two-thirds of the vehicle, which is mainly aluminum lithium alloy tanks containing liquid oxygen and rocket grade kerosene, that is the RP1 propellant, and it got 9 Merlin 1D engines at its base. On the top right of your screen, let me show first the how it looks from the bottom, the Merlin 9 1D engines. Now on the top right of your screen is the Merlin 1D engine, and below that is the Merlin vacuum engine, which is also referred as MVAC engine. Now the Falcon 9 generates more than 1.7 million pounds of thrust at sea level. Those engines do the bulk of the work to get Falcon 9 off the ground from the launch pad into the thinner part of the Earth's atmosphere. The 9 Merlin engines on the first stage are gradually throttled near the end of the first stage flight to limit launch vehicle acceleration as the rocket's mass decreases with the burning of fuel. These engines are also used to reorient the first stage prior to re-entry and to deaccelerate the vehicle for landing. Next we got the landing legs placed symmetrically around the base of the Falcon 9 first stage are the 4 landing legs made of carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb. They are stored at the base of the vehicle and deployed just prior to landing. Now let's unpack some key features and milestones of this incredible spacecraft in a pictorial form. Here is a quick overview of Falcon 9 for your reference. As we discussed, at the very top we have the fairing. Below that we got the second stage, that is our MVAC engine. Now just below the second stage we have the interstage, which connects the first stage and the second stage, also which houses the center pusher mechanism which separates the first stage and the second stage, and it also houses the Merlin vacuum engine's vacuum nozzle. Now below the interstage we are having our first stage, also referred as the booster, and the below the, or you can say at the end of the first stage or the booster, we got the Merlin engines and the landing legs. About 2.5 minutes into the flight, the stages will separate the first stage and will make its way back to Earth, and it will be attempting a drone ship landing for today. To plan Falcon 9's first stage will come back to Earth today, landing about 8.5 minutes approximately after it launches on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas, which will be stationed in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. Meanwhile, the Falcon 9's upper stage will continue to haul the 22 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit, and the spacecraft are set to deploy nearly 52 minutes and 32 seconds from liftoff. Currently, SpaceX is targeting 9:32 p.m. Eastern Time for the liftoff. No, excuse me, there is an update. Let me check it and make you guys updated. Just give me a couple of seconds. So currently again SpaceX push the liftoff time. Now currently they are targeting for 9:57 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:57 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7th, and it will be 1:57 a.m. UTC Saturday, that is on June 8th. As we are having a kind of 1 hour nearly in our hand, it's about like 50 minutes we are having more from liftoff, and also we are not having any live feed of Falcon 9 from the launch pad as other big channels are having, so we have to repeat discussing these details which we discussed earlier. So let's take a look back again at this today's payload details for Starlink Group 10-1 mission. This launch marks the 42nd dedicated launch for this year. Also, a fact to be mentioned that the first launch of 21 Starlink version 2 mini satellites, known as Starlink Group 6-1, took place from Space Launch Complex 40 here only at Cape Canaveral, Florida on February 27th, back on 2023, if I'm not wrong. Also, a quick fun fact: at the inception, the two identical Starlink test satellites called Microsat 2A and Microsat 2B were launched on 22nd February back on 2018. Upon orbital deployment, they got renamed to Tintin A and Tintin B. So Tintin A and Tintin B are the first Starlink satellites to be launched ever. Now the Starlink satellites are built at SpaceX Satellite Development Facility back in Redmond, Washington. Now today's launch consists of 22 version 2 mini satellites. The version 2 variant of Starlink is too large to fit inside a Falcon 9 fairing and is meant to be launched by Starship. So for the very reason, SpaceX modified the original version 2 blueprint into a smaller and more compact one named version 2 mini. SpaceX also indicated that they would build satellites of the second generation constellation in two different but technically identical form factors, one with the physical structure tailored to launch on Falcon 9, that is version 2 mini, and the another for the launch on Starship, that is the mother, version 2. Each Starlink satellite is equipped with powerful 5 advanced Ku based array antennas and 3 dual band parabolic antennas utilizing Ka and E band to provide increased capacity. Together, these antennas utilizes Ku, Ka, and E-band frequencies, which allows Starlink to provide high bandwidth connectivity that is the 4 times more capacity per satellite than earlier versions. Each satellite features a dual solar array with a size of 52.5 square meters, that is 565 square feet, which unfolds to a wingspan of 100 feet. Also, it has a high capacity battery to provide power to the payloads. The two solar arrays are also aeroneutral, which enables faster on-orbit maneuvers whenever required. Each Starlink satellite contains 3 space laser transponders, that is optical inter-satellite links or ISLs, for intercommunications operating at up to 200 Gbps, which together across the constellation form a global internet mesh that can connect customers anywhere in the world, also enabling the spacecraft to transmit data without local ground stations, providing truly global coverage. Each Starlink version 2 mini satellite weighs nearly 800 kilograms, that is 1763 pounds. Starlink satellites are equipped with efficient ion Hall effect thrusters powered by argon, which enable Starlink satellite to orbit raise, maneuver in space, and deorbit at the end of their useful life. Starlink is the first Krypton-propelled spacecraft ever flown. Later, switched to argon Hall effect thrusters for cost effectiveness. Also, upon switching to argon, Starlink is the first argon-propelled spacecraft ever flown in space. Now, relative to Krypton, the argon required to fuel Starlink version 2 satellites will be practically free. To put it into perspective, fueling its next constellation of almost 30,000 version 2 satellites could cost SpaceX less than fueling 4,000 version 1 satellites, which were based on Krypton. Also, SpaceX claims that its second generation thrusters using argon has 2.4 times the thrust and 1.5 times the specific impulse of previously Krypton fueled thruster. Today's payload will be placed in an orbit with an altitude of 560 kilometers and an inclination of 53 degrees. But it is worth mentioning that as of now, we found this altitude and inclination details to be the most relevant and accurate upon researching and spending several hours after it, but in real it may differ, as today's launch is the first launch of Starlink Group 10. Post today's launch, we will be getting the most accurate and trustworthy details for the orbital placement and will be reflected in our future streams. Also, these orbital placement configurations does not apply to every Starlink satellites. Starlink satellites are placed in different configurations based on their group, and we will dive into those details more thoroughly in a while. Starlink uses custom-built navigation sensors named Star Tracker that surveys the stars to determine each satellite's location, altitude, and orientation for best possible broadband throughput. Each Starlink satellite contains 4 reaction wheels, providing agile attitude control for the vehicle. The hot spare configuration ensures high reliability operation and its aluminum flywheel is fully demisable at the end of life. Also worth mentioning, the Starlink satellites are equipped with an autonomous collision avoidance system for avoiding collisions with other spacecraft and space junks autonomously, which utilizes the US Department of Defense debris tracking database. Currently, SpaceX is targeting to today a liftoff time of 9:56 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:56 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is on June 7th, and this will be 1:56 a.m. UTC Saturday, that is on June 8th. Now the liftoff time is nearing to the end of the launch window. Just only 14 minutes left from the launch window to be expiring for today, that is at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Hopefully they will make it to launch. Now let's go through a quick comparison of latency between Starlink and geostationary satellites. Earlier, some days before, we had an update that Starlink achieved a new internal median latency record of 28 milliseconds. And now they have raised a goal of median latency for Starlink internet in the US to get below 20 milliseconds. So you know the internet that comes from satellite, most of the time it is from a single satellite that's orbiting about 35,786 kilometers from Earth. As because it is so far away, the time it takes for the data to go back and forth, what we call latency, is pretty high. This makes it tough to do things like streaming movies, playing online games, or making video calls. Now let's talk about Starlink. It's like a big team of thousands of satellites that are very much closer to us, just about 550 kilometers from Earth. They are all over the place, covering the whole globe, and because they are closer, the latency is way lower. To put it into perspective, Just imagine 25 milliseconds of latency compared to 600 and plus seconds of millisecond, 600 plus milliseconds of latency. You can see on your screen what is the number of round trips in case of Starlink compared to a geostationary satellite. That's a huge difference. So in nutshell, Starlink's lower orbit makes it a game changer for satellite internet. This could mean smoother video calls, lag-free online gaming and other high data rate activities. Moving on, let's learn a little bit about Starlink's collision avoidance system. It's quite fascinating to know how, despite having so many satellites around the Earth, they manage to stay safe and avoid collisions. SpaceX designs the Starlink satellite orbit raising and orbit lowering reference trajectories with a time optimal path planning algorithm. The algorithm includes additional constraints to ensure that the Starlink satellites always remain at a large and a safe distance from space stations, other spacecrafts, space debris, and from other Starlink satellites as well under nominal circumstances. As an additional safety measure, Starlink screening system constantly monitors the satellite's planned reference trajectories against the space stations, other spacecraft, space debris, and other Starlink satellites. The system alerts the Starlink operators immediately when a potential conjunction is detected, and reference trajectories are replanned to change the geometry of the encounter and avoid the conjunction whenever possible. Each Starlink launch typically includes enough satellites to fill several orbital planes, and for this very reason, a train of satellites is usually divided into smaller trains that depart from parking orbit on different dates to target specific orbital planes, which is also a part of pre-planned conjunction avoidance. The techniques for avoiding conjunctions at the planning stages are an additional precaution in addition to Starlink's onboard collision avoidance system. Although it comes with a drawback, in this context, conjunction avoidance during planning refers to designing trajectories that maintain certain satellites far away from space station, other spacecraft, space junks, and other Starlink satellites under nominal circumstances. Deconflicting trajectories at the planning stage requires predicting potential conjunctions several weeks into the future, now which naturally limits the accuracy of the results. As part of SpaceX's multi-tiered approach to space safety, Starlink's automatic collision avoidance system allows satellites to plan maneuvers to minimize the collision probability during close approaches that could not be avoided when planning. Now let's take a look into this table we have here for the orbital status of second generation Starlink satellites prior to today's launch. As mentioned before, you will notice the difference in orbital placement parameters for each group of Starlink satellites. In this case, we have details for group 5, 6, 7 and 8. As of now, we don't have any official information regarding the group 10, but the informations surfacing on the internet, it refers that they have a little resemblance with group 7 and 8. First we are having the nominal altitude. So for group 5 and 6, they are planned to orbit at an altitude of 530 kilometers, while for group 7 it is 525 kilometers and for group 8 it is 535 kilometers. As of now, what information we got doing our research for several hours, today the group 10 Starlink satellites will be placed at an altitude of 560 kilometers with an inclination of 53 degrees. Also, a point to be noted is that the satellites can be deployed between a range of -50 kilometers to +70 kilometers relative to nominal altitude, but not exceeding the maximum of 580 kilometers. A nominal altitude is the average altitude at which the satellites in a particular group are intended to orbit the Earth. Next, for the inclination, for group 5 and 6, they have an inclination of 43 degrees, whereas group 7 and 8 have an inclination of 53 degrees. As mentioned before, today Starlink Group 10-1 satellites will be having an inclination of 53 degrees, resembling the inclination degree of group 7 and 8. Inclination is the angle between the orbital plane of the satellites and the equatorial plane of the Earth. Next, the planned satellites for each group, they have a plan to launch 2500 satellites for different orbital and suborbital completions. Moving on to the satellites launched for each group. Prior to today's launch, the status is for group 5, 699 satellites. For group 6, 1387 satellites have been launched. For group 7, 389 satellites have been launched, and for group 8, 81 satellites have been launched so far, with the recent launch of Starlink Group 8-5 mission, including direct to cell satellites. Now we have next the active satellites. So the current status prior to today's launch is for group 5, 688 out of 699 satellites are active. For group 6, 1349 out of 1387 launched satellites are active. For group 7, 385 out of 389, and for group 8 all the launch satellites are active so far, that is 81 out of 81. The active satellites is the number of launched satellites that are currently in an active state and working, excluding decaying, deorbited and failed ones. Next, we got the required satellites for completion. For group 5 and 6, an additional of 414 satellites are required. For group 7, 2111 satellites are required, and for group 8 more 2419 satellites are required. These are the number of additional satellites that are needed to be launched to complete the orbital shell and subshells for each group. Now we have a request again for you all. If you haven't already, consider giving this video a like. It really helps YouTube's algorithm to bring in more space fans and rocket enthusiasts to find this video out. And if you are feeling we are adding value to your viewing experience, consider subscribing. We would be super grateful for your support. Now let's take a look at the flight record for the booster supporting today's Starlink 10-1 mission. The booster supporting today's mission is having a tail number that is 1069, which is quite a mature booster, with 15 previous flights in its record, including missions like commercial resupply mission, that is the CRS-24, Eutelsat Hotbird 13F, OneWeb 1, SCS-13 and SCS-19, and 11 Starlink missions. The last Starlink mission which it supported was Group 6-57 mission back in May 6th of this year. Previously, with Starlink Group 6-59 launch on May 17th, from here at Cape Canaveral, SpaceX achieved a record. For the first time, a Falcon booster with tail number 1062 launched for record-breaking 21st time. Currently, other boosters with tail number 1060, 1061 and 1067 have 20 launches so far as their milestones and are waiting to reach their record-breaking milestones soon. Now let's have a look at the bar graph depicting the Falcon 9 launches each year. Before today's launch, SpaceX completed 58 launches of Falcon 9 so far this year as part of its milestone. with recent Starlink 8-5 mission launch from here at Space Launch Complex 40, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station back on June 4th. SpaceX hit a big milestone this year's 50th launch with the previous Starlink 8-7 mission. That's just two more than half of last year's Falcon 9 launches, which totaled 48. Now, with the last Starlink mission, that is Group 8-5, they have 10 more launches than half of the total launches made last year. This year's count already surpasses the total number of Falcon 9 launches from all the years leading up to 2021, and now they are getting close to launches made in 2022 with only 3 launches to go. Now, with today's launch of Starlink Group 10-1 mission, the bar graph depicts 59 Falcon 9 launches so far this year. They have already done more than the half as many launches as they did all of last year, and it's only been just 5 months and a week. If they keep up with this pace, they are on their mighty way to hit 140 to 148 launches by the end of this year. SpaceX is really pushing hard to achieve their big goals. Also, we just witnessed 4th integrated flight test of the Starship on June 6th, which went quite well, and they did succeeded for a successful splashdown of both the booster 11 and ship 29, and now awaiting the 5th one tentatively towards the end of June or early July. Now please allow us a couple of seconds to check whether the launch is on time or not and to stay updated. Just be tuned in here, we will be right back in just a few seconds only. So don't go anywhere else. Sorry guys, it took us some time as we were making the timer on, and as of now, as we checked, that SpaceX is still sticking to their the last change of time for the liftoff, that is 9:56 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6:56 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is on June 7th, and which will be 1:56 a.m. UTC Saturday, that is on June 8th. Again, as we move through the countdown, we just want to say thanks to everyone joining us live. We really appreciate you being here. Big thanks to our amazing YouTube community for being here today. And if you haven't already, please like this video to help YouTube's algorithm to bring more space fans to discover this stream and join us. And if you consider subscribing to us, we would be super grateful for your support. Let's go ahead as we progress through the countdown and review the milestone that's lie ahead for us on this Cape Canaveral flight. At T minus 38 minutes, countdown begins at this point when SpaceX launch director gives the go for the start of propellant load. If everything looks fine, prop load begins at T minus 30 minutes mark with the beginning of rocket grade kerosene or RP1 on board the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, LOX load, that is super chilled liquid oxygen, is loaded on board the first stage. And then at T minus 16 minutes, which will be the next event that we are looking for here, that's when the second stage liquid oxygen load begins. And at T minus 7 minutes, that's when the chill down of 9 Merlin engines gets underway, which involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through plumbing and turbopumps, which helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damages during the startup sequence. At about 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full, and in a T minus 4.5 minute, the strong back retract sequence begins. The strong back retract process begins with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairing opening up, followed by the transport ejector on the strong back reclining about 1.5 degrees from the Falcon 9. It remains in that position until liftoff. It's when it rapidly pulls back to clear the way for Falcon 9's rocket's vertical ascent. The strong back positioned alongside the vehicle, also referred as the transport ejector or acronymed as TE, fulfills multiple functions. It supplies propellants, provides air conditioning, pressurization gases, and electrical power. Additionally, it transports the Falcon 9 to the launch pad and positions it for the launch. At T minus 3 minute mark, the first stage liquid oxygen loading should be complete, followed by the second stage liquid oxygen loading wrapping up at T minus 2 minutes mark. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. At T minus 1 minute mark, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. Would like to welcome Eric Kohler. Thanks for translating that. Actually, I was not knowing that it was written by Marcos Antonio, but let's go as you said. And thanks for joining us. Hope you will be enjoying the stream. And also we are hoping that SpaceX will be launching today at least, because as stated earlier in the stream, today we have 40% probability of violation and 60% probability of favorable outlook. So hopefully they can make it. Let's pray for that. So moving on, at T minus 1 minute mark, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure, and in the final 60 seconds countdown, the control of the flight system, that is launch sequence, is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. Now if everything looks good, at T minus 45 seconds mark, the SpaceX launch director will be giving the final go for Falcon 9 liftoff. At T minus 3 seconds, the engine ignition sequence start command being issued by onboard engine controller. And finally at T0 we have liftoff. If all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy, flight computers will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9. We are currently targeting for 9:56 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:56 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Friday, that is June 7, which will be 1:56 a.m. UTC Saturday, that is on June 8th. Just let me check it in a quick jiffy. Yes, so far it looks like it's still on time for now. It is on time for now. So let's move on and briefly step through the trajectory for today's mission. Falcon 9 will lift off from Space Launch Complex 40, that is Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, with the spacecraft on board the batch of 22 Starlink satellites for a northeast trajectory heading into low Earth orbit, that is indicated by that green line on your screen. The red line indicates where Falcon 9 first stage will land after stage separation just a little later, leaving Florida's Space Coast. This is going to be a drone ship landing using autonomous spaceport drone ship. For today, it's A Shortfall of Gravitas drone ship, one of the two here on the east coast, which means that the first stage booster with tail number 1069 flying for the 16th time will be returning, heading out to the drone ship for its landing. As of now, planned booster recovery is 618 kilometers, with estimated fairing recovery at nearly 700 kilometers downrange, and stage 2 debris re-entry will be south of Australia. Today's mission, that is Starlink 10-1, is a bit special, as it is the first Starlink mission from Cape to launch on a northeast trajectory in 1.5 years. Also, we will be having the 300 Falcon 9 landing today happening, so that's also a record breaking thing. Now we expect the addition of a fourth drone ship likely by the end of this year or early next year, As of now, there are 3 in the SpaceX drone ship fleet. One of the 3 drone ships, of the 3 drone ships, just read the instructions and A Shortfall of Gravitas are stationed here in Florida, while Of Course I Still Love You is stationed in California. Speaking of the fairing recovery, the 2 halves of the payload fairing will be recovered slightly farther downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship, after they will smoothly splash down with the guidance of parachutes. As mentioned before, it is an estimated fairing recovery distance of 700 kilometers downrange. SpaceX will utilize a recovery vessel to retrieve them from Atlantic waters. SpaceX manufactures the fairings in-house, with a total cost of 2 halves is nearly $6 million. No wonder that SpaceX aims to recover the fairings for repetitive use, mirroring their approach with rocket boosters, upholding the motto of reusability. You can see on your screen how a fairing recovery looks like. Although on your screen you are seeing the recovery vessel dug, but for today's it is the supporting recovery vessel is Bob. This other recovery vessel Doug is currently awaiting its next assignment. Now I'm skipping some slides to show because we are nearing to the start of the webcast. Just for in a quick recap for the stats we are having here, that's today's launch marks 354th SpaceX Falcon overall launch, and it will be the 42nd dedicated launch of Starlink satellite for this year. Also, this is the 343rd Falcon 9 launch to date. Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission with tail number 1069 will be flying for its 16th time, that is on its 16th flight. Also, it is the 59th Falcon 9 launch of 2024 so far, and is SpaceX's 61st overall launch of this year, including the 3rd and the 4th integrated flight test of Starship. We are expecting the next, that is the 5th integrated flight test of Starship, probably on the end of June or early July. This is SpaceX 288th Falcon 9 reflight to date, that is the launch of a booster that has flown at least once before. 191st orbital launch for SpaceX, launching from Slick 40. This will be the 246th overall orbital launch from this pad, that is Space Launch Complex 40 here at Cape Canaveral. And with this mission success, SpaceX will have a remarkable 6,593 Starlink satellites launched to date. Moving on to some reusability statistics. This launch marks 274th Falcon 9 booster reflight to date. Previously I mentioned it will be the 288th Falcon booster reflight to date. So there is a difference, and This will be the 74th landing on A Shortfall of Gravitas drone ship, 16th landing of the first stage booster supporting today's mission with tail number 1069. With this mission's first stage landing, which paves the way to 248th overall drone ship landing. As mentioned before, it will be marking 300th Falcon 9 landing to date and 317th SpaceX overall landing to date. Now let's have a look into key stats for SpaceX launches in this year, including today's mission. SpaceX has a total of 61 launches, and out of those 17 were non-Starlink missions and 2 Starship launches. SpaceX reused booster for 57 times in those launches, showing their commitment to sustainability and reusability. If we look into the geographical distribution, they got 41 launches from East Coast with 12 from Launch Complex 39A, that is Kennedy Space Center, and 29 from Space Launch Complex 40, including today's one that is from here at Cape Canaveral. On the West Coast, we have 18 launches. That's from Space Launch Complex 4 East, Vandenberg Space Force Base, and there was 2 launches from Gulf Coast of Starbase back in Texas for Starship's 3rd and 4th integrated flight test. As for landings, they have nailed it 58 times. Most of them were drone ships with 45 successful landings, 14 on Of Course I Still Love You, 12 on Just Read the Instructions, and 19 on A Shortfall of Gravitas, including one from today. And for ground landings, they have pulled off 13 times, 8 times on landing zone 1, only 1 time on landing zone 2, and 4 times on landing zone 4. So now guys, I think the webcast should be beginning. Just let me check. Yes, it's starting. So just hang on for a second. Now I'm just praying that those violations of 40% won't be affecting today's launch, and we will be seeing the first launch of Starlink Group 10. As mentioned previously, this will be a northeast launch from Cape Canaveral. Previously we used to see southeasterly launch. Today we will be seeing northeasterly launch nearly after 1.5 years. And you have heard the call out with pressurizing the tanks.
Strong lift blower has started.
Also, the strong back retraction process has been started, is now underway. You can see the clamp arms around the stage 2 are now coming to open. You are seeing the clamp arms opening up underneath the payload fairing, the transport director reclining 1.5 degrees from the vehicle, now less than, well, the timer is a little bit wrong here, which we put. Anyways, we are less than 3.5 minutes away from liftoff. Coming up at T minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds, everything continues to be go. We are currently chilling in the Merlin engine back from T minus 7 minutes when we open up the pre-valves, which allows the propellant down to the engines to get them prepared for the ignition just before T0. Next, we will be getting a call out for stage 1 LOX load being complete.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Just on time, we got the call out right away. Liquid oxygen loading of the first stage is complete. We are now awaiting for the second stage that will finish up at just inside 2 minus 2 minutes mark. Now currently we are inside 2.5 minutes and the range continues to be green, and the weather, I guess, of course, it is supported and cooperating. We don't expect any weather condition to develop in the last couple of minutes. Again, if for some reason we don't launch today, we do have a backup opportunity for tomorrow. We will be listening in a couple of seconds for the LOX load closeout on the second stage.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And to call out to our countdown, stage 2 LOX load is complete. All propellants are now on board the Falcon 9 with 1 million pounds of propellant. We are now beginning to vent down the pressure that was in the tubing on the strong back. That's why you can see those clouds coming out there. Next, the call out will be ground gas closeout.
Gas launch closeouts have started.
Ground gas closeout call out. That's where we bleed the pressure off, and that's cold gas when it reacts with the moist humid air, which gives you that nice white cloud, an indicator of an upcoming launch. Next event T minus 1 minute, we should be hearing the call out for the Falcon 9. Flight computers are in startup and controlling the rocket for the remainder of the countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Right on time, Falcon 9 flight computers on stage 1 and stage 2 are running the rocket through the last minute of count. Now let's listen to the go callouts from the launch
director. Go for launch.
SpaceX launch director giving go for the launch. We are coming up on T minus 30 seconds nearly. All system continues to be remaining go for launch of Falcon 9 and Starlink.
30 seconds.
30 seconds from liftoff.
$15 seconds. Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine full power. And liftoff of Starlink. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
And we have liftoff. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Call out for vehicle pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal as well. We should hear a call out for engine chamber pressure. "30 seconds into the flight, Falcon 9 on its way with 22 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call out. Power and telemetry as well as propulsion is nominal. We are into the throttle bucket.
Vehicle is supersonic.
We are into the throttle bucket. 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 We are into the We are throttling down the 9 Merlin engine as we prepare for the maximum dynamic stress coming up. We did got a call out for the vehicle being supersonic. We have exceeded Mach 1 on the Falcon 9. It's now
Max
faster
Q.
than the speed of sound. Max Q call out. We are through the period of maximum stress on the vehicle. We throttled the Merlin engines back up to full power. Next call out we will be expecting will be the MVAC engine chill.
MVAC chill has started.
Right now we have started to chill down the MVAC engine on the second stage prior to its ignition just after stage separation. Coming up 3 events in rapid succession: the shutdown of main engine on first stage, that is the main engine cut off MECO, followed by stage separation and ignition of the second stage MVAC engine, that is SES-1, that will boost the payload into the low Earth orbit. Let's hear the callouts. Meanwhile, we have a request: please consider liking this stream and subscribing to us, as we are striving so hard to deliver the best we can.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And we got all the 3 callouts in rapid succession events, that is MECO, stage separation and MVAC ignition. The stage nitrogen thrusters is now beginning to reorient the first stage, and the flight computers has commanded the 4 hypersonic titanium
Fairing
grid fins
separation confirmed.
to slowly deploying as the stage separation is successful. And we did got a call out for the fairing separation being successful. You are looking right now a view of the first stage, although it's a little dark there as it's night time. It will continue to rise towards apogee before descending back towards the landing on droneship, A Shortfall of
Vehicles
Gravitas,
are on nominal trajectory.
stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. Second stage, meanwhile, in the middle of its 6-minute burn, is on its way into the parking orbit. We got good call out for the nominal trajectories for both the vehicles, both the first stage and the second stage. So far the launch has been great. The first stage has done its job and it's on its way back. The second stage is running at full power and we are getting amazing views from space. Although not only from the second stage we are getting the views, but it is in space. Now we are getting ready for the first stage to return to the drone ship landing site. Now during this part of the flight, stage 1 relies solely on its grid fin for steering as it returns to Earth. These grid fins orient the Falcon 9 during re-entry and guide the rocket during its descent. Right now we are not getting any good views, but still, if we will be getting, you can occasionally see on the left side of your screen nitrogen gas bursts from the first stage for altitude control. These are basically used to position the vehicle as it heads back toward the drone ship. Next call out we are expecting is for stage 1 entry burn to start up. Meanwhile, Eric Kohler, yes, we did had a go and we did got a launch finally. I was a little skeptical for today's launch. Fairmed, as you say, yay, we had a launch. And ground landings, yeah, really. To Eric, I'm referring ground landings. I also like the best. They looks cool. Thanks both of you that you are still here with us, at least waiting for such a long time. I didn't got a chance to see a live launch in real, and I want that, Eric. Really, I mean it. I want to feel that roar and like passing through the ground to my
Stage
body.
1 entry burn startup.
And there's a confirmation we just lit 3 of the
Stage
Merlin
1
1D
FTS is saved.
engines on the first stage. As you can see now, we are rapidly slowing down the vehicle down as it enters the Earth's atmosphere, and this burn should last just around 27 seconds. Next call out, stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Entry burn shutdown.
And there we go, that's confirmation of shutdown of the entry burn on the first stage. The Falcon 9 first stage is equipped with 4 landing legs, and those are made out of carbon fiber with an aluminum honeycomb. They are placed symmetrically around the
Both
body of the
vehicles are
rocket
nominal trajectories.
and will deploy just prior to the prior to the landing. And also I missed stating that we did got a call out for stage 1 FTS being saved. Next we will be expecting a call out for stage 2 FTS being saved when it will be having an insertion burn. Also expecting a call
Stage
out
1
for
transonic.
that I was going to say, stage 1 being transonic. Now we are traveling slower than the speed of sound as it heads towards the landing. Speaking of landing, we are just about 60 seconds away from that. You are lucky, Eric, that you saw a space shuttle launch. Really, I mean it.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
And here we go, great shot of that landing burn with that center E9 engine now lit. We are slowing down the vehicle very rapidly. Should be seeing those landing legs deploy any seconds now.
Landing leg deployed.
Landing legs got deployed.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. We have successfully made the 317th
FTS
landing
saved.
of the orbital class rocket. Also, this landing marks the 300th
Impact shutdown.
landing of Falcon 9 to date. We did call out for the second stage engine cutoff, that is SECO 1. Following that, we have entered into
Nominal
a 45
orbit insertion.
minutes of coast phase, and we got a good call out for nominal orbit insertion. And with that, these callouts we were waiting for, second stage engine cutoff, that is SECO 1, and a good nominal orbit confirmation for that. As mentioned before, today's landing marks 317th overall landing of an orbital class rocket. And with that, we will wrap up our coverage for now. Would like to thank Eric and Fairmate for both of you joining us and staying till the very end. Hope you guys have a nice day ahead. Also be sure to check out the social media for confirmation of Starlink deployment. We want to thank all of you joining us with today's launch, and we hope you all will be enjoying the weekend. Why you are saying sorry, Fairmade? I should be saying sorry, and not even me. SpaceX should be saying sorry that it took so long to launch. But anyways, it's fine. I'm still awake from last one night. Anyways, have a nice day. Hope you had a good lunch. And also to Eric, goodbye for now. Hope to see you soon. And referring to everyone, hope you all enjoyed the stream. Once again, thanks for joining us. showing your such patience, love, and understanding till staying till the end. We are glad to have you all here with us. This is AstroYonder Live and me, Dipta, signing off for now, and we will see you next time.